My name is Wendy. My mother, Mary, was a silent shadow in the house, her voice barely a whisper against my father, George's, booming commands. I remember the day my youngest brother, Tom, was born. The house, usually grim and silent, buzzed with a different energy. My father's stern face cracked into a rare smile, a sight so unfamiliar it almost scared me. Finally, another boy. George boomed, his voice echoing through the walls. A real man to carry on the family name. I was 10, standing in the corner, clutching my ragged doll, feeling smaller than usual. Mother, with her usual downcast eyes, turned to me briefly, her look fleeting but full of an unspoken apology. As the years rolled on, the gap between me and my family grew wider. I was like a ghost in my own home, seen but never acknowledged, unless it was to criticize or to command. "Wendy, make yourself useful and help your mother," George would say, not even bothering to look at me. His world was black and white, a world where women had their place, and that place certainly wasn't alongside men. Then, like a breath of fresh air in a suffocating room, my Aunt Laura visited. She was my mother's younger sister, but lived a world apart. She and her husband, Uncle John, couldn't have children, and she saw something in me that perhaps even I didn't see at the time. "Mary, George, I want to talk about Wendy," she said one evening, her voice firm, her eyes locking with each of theirs in turn. "What about her?" my father grunted, his disinterest palpable. "She's not a child anymore. She needs more than what she's getting here. She needs education, freedom, a chance to be more," Laura said, her voice unwavering. "And what do you propose?" my father asked, his tone dismissive, his eyes already drifting to the television. "I want to take her with me. John and I can provide for her, give her the opportunities she deserves." There was a pause, the kind that's heavy and thick, filled with unspoken words and buried resentments. "And why would we just hand over our daughter to you?" my father finally said, his words sharp like a knife. "Because, George, you and I both know you don't care about her. You care about your sons, your precious legacy. Wendy is just another mouth to feed, another pair of hands to work around the house. With me, she'll be more. So, what do you say?" The room went silent. My mother's eyes were on the floor, her hands wringing her apron. My father's face was unreadable, a mask of indifference. "Do what you want," he said finally, turning back to the TV, dismissing us, dismissing my entire existence with a flick of his wrist. And just like that, I was given a new life, a chance to escape the invisible chains. Aunt Laura's house was different. There, words were spoken with kindness, and dreams weren't just laughed at but nurtured. Uncle John treated me not as a burden but as a promise of what could be. College was like stepping into another universe. I was eternally grateful to my aunt and uncle, who gave me the opportunity to study and explore the world. I met Michael in an economics class. He was debating with the professor, his confidence filling the room. I remember thinking, who is this guy? He noticed me too, but not for the reasons I would have liked. "Hey, you! Why do you look so serious? This is college, lighten up," he teased, flashing a grin that most girls in class swooned over. I wasn't most girls. "Maybe because I'm here to learn, not to fool around," I shot back, my eyes meeting his, challenging. He looked surprised, then intrigued. "I'm Michael," he said, extending his hand. "Wendy," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. That was the beginning. We were like two planets in orbit, drawn together by a force we couldn't resist. We studied together, debated fiercely, and laughed loudly. His family, who lived in another city, welcomed me with open arms. His mother, Linda, was warm and caring, a stark contrast to my own mother's subdued presence. "Wendy, dear, you're like the daughter I never had," Linda exclaimed one day as we were baking in her cozy kitchen. I felt a lump in my throat. "Thank you, Linda. You and Michael have made me feel so welcome." Michael's father, Peter, was more reserved, but his nods of approval spoke volumes. "You're good for our Michael. Keeps him on his toes," he would say with a twinkle in his eye. Life with Michael felt like a dream, but not the kind that fades with the morning light. It was real, vibrant, and filled with love. When we found out about the baby, it was the cherry on top of our already perfect life. His family's reaction was joyous. "A grandchild. Oh, Wendy, you've made us so happy." Linda hugged me tightly, her happiness infectious. Peter clapped Michael on the back. "You're going to be a great dad, just like you're a great son." Life was buzzing with the anticipation of our baby when the doorbell rang one chilly evening. Michael was late from work, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, I opened the door and was met with a face from the past. Tom, my youngest brother, looking weary, his eyes avoiding mine. "Tom? What are you doing here?" I stammered, my heart pounding with a mixture of shock and a strange sense of foreboding. "Hey, Wendy. I left home. I can't stand it there anymore. I need a place to crash, just for a while," he mumbled, his gaze still fixed on the ground. His sudden appearance after years of silence was jarring. Tom reminded those dark days, standing on my doorstep, asking for refuge. I hesitated, memories of our father's stern voice and cold home flooding back. But looking at Tom, seeing the desperation in his eyes, the shared blood between us spoke louder. "Come in, Tom. You can stay for a few nights," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "Who's this?" Michael asked, surprise etched on his face as he came home to find Tom sitting awkwardly in our living room. "This is Tom, my brother. He left home and needed a place to stay for a few days," I explained, watching Michael's face for any signs of discomfort. Michael nodded, his usual easygoing nature taking over. "All right, man. Make yourself at home. But we have some ground rules in this house. Respect is key." Tom just nodded, his eyes still not meeting ours. The dinner that night was tense, with forced conversation and polite smiles. Afterward, as I was clearing the dishes, Michael pulled me aside. "Wendy, are you sure about this? Your brother seems troubled," he whispered, his concern clear in his eyes. "I know, Michael. But he's family. We can't just turn him away. Let's give him a chance, okay?" I replied, hoping I wasn't making a mistake. The days turned into weeks, and the initial shock of Tom's arrival faded into a grim routine. Our home, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt tense and uneasy. One morning, I found Tom in the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge with a disgruntled look on his face. "What's this? Where's the real food? I need a proper breakfast," he grumbled, holding up a carton of almond milk with disdain. "Tom, that's what we have. If you want something else, you're welcome to buy it yourself," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, but feeling my patience wearing thin. He scoffed, slamming the fridge door shut. Back at home, women knew how to take care of the men. They cooked, they cleaned, they didn't talk back. I felt a surge of anger, but I took a deep breath, reminding myself that confrontation wouldn't solve anything. "Tom, this isn't back at home. This is my house, and here, we respect each other. We share responsibilities. If you're not okay with that, maybe it's time you find another place to stay." He looked at me, his eyes cold and challenging, but he didn't say anything. I could tell my words had hit a nerve, but I wasn't sure if they'd made any real impact. Later that day, I was folding laundry when Michael walked in, a worried look on his face. "Wendy, we need to talk about Tom. It's not working out. He's not respecting our space, our rules. It's like he's trying to impose his way of living on us," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "I know, Michael. I feel it too. It's like walking on eggshells around him. But he's my brother. I can't just kick him out, I replied, feeling torn between my loyalty to my family and the need to protect the sanctity of our home. The conversation lingered in my mind as the day went on. That evening, as we all sat down for dinner, the tension was palpable. Tom's attitude was more sullen than usual, his silence a heavy presence at the table. Tom, we need to talk. This situation isn't working. You're not respecting the way we live, and it's causing a lot of tension, I said, gathering my courage. So, what? You're kicking me out? He shot back, his voice sharp. No, but we need to find a middle ground. You need to respect our rules, our lifestyle. You can't just expect us to change everything for you, I replied, my voice steady but firm. He stared at me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought he might explode, but then he just nodded his head in agreement and left the room. The days following our confrontation with Tom were strained. It felt as though we were all collectively holding our breath, waiting for the fragile peace to break. And it did, but not in any way we could have anticipated. In my final trimester, when excitement should have been building, I started to feel distinctly unwell. Initially, it was just an unsettling sensation of dizziness and a persistent tiredness, but it rapidly escalated into something more alarming. One morning, the world seemed to spin dangerously, leaving me gripping the bed sheets in desperation. Michael, something's wrong, I gasped, trying to steady my swirling vision. Immediately, Michael was at my side, his expression etched with deep concern. What is it, Wendy? Tell me what's happening. I feel, it's hard to explain, really dizzy, weak. I think, we need to get to the hospital, I managed between labored breaths, the effort of speaking leaving me exhausted. Without hesitation, Michael supported me to the car, his face a mixture of worry and resolve. The journey to the hospital passed in a haze, my mind a whirlpool of concern for the baby and myself. Upon arrival, the medical team sprang into action, their expressions serious, their movements deliberate. We need to admit you, monitor both you and the baby closely. It's a precarious situation, one of the doctors said, her tone calm yet authoritative. I simply nodded, the gravity of the situation rendering me speechless. My gaze met Michael's, seeing in his eyes a storm of fear and determination. Wendy, I'm right here with you. We'll face this together, he assured me, his voice a solid anchor in the tumult of my fears. As days in the hospital turned into weeks, the strain on Michael became increasingly evident. Each visit, I could see the fatigue etching deeper lines on his face, the brightness in his eyes dimming under the weight of his responsibilities. One evening, he arrived looking particularly worn, his usual buoyancy replaced by a heavy tiredness. Michael, you're running on empty. Is everything okay? I asked, momentarily setting aside my own worries in the face of his evident exhaustion. He exhaled deeply, the action seeming to drain what little energy he had left. It's a lot to juggle, work, the house, Tom. It's like I'm trying to hold everything together. But don't worry, I'm managing, he said, though his voice betrayed the immense pressure he was under. Over time, however, the daily visits from Michael began to wane. His phone calls became infrequent, and when he did call, his voice carried a harshness, a coldness that was unfamiliar, yet disturbingly reminiscent of Tom's tone. The warm, supportive husband I knew seemed to have retreated, leaving behind a person whose words and tone mirrored the unsettling and patriarchal attitude that Tom had brought into our home. The shift was subtle yet jarring, a chilling reminder of the oppressive shadows I thought I had left far behind. The day I held my newborn daughter for the first time should have been pure joy, but instead, it was tainted with a harsh reality I never saw coming. After the exhausting labor, I was eager to share the news with Michael, to see the look on his face when he met our daughter. But all my calls went unanswered, his phone ringing into the void. With no other options, I gathered my strength, held my daughter close, and decided to head home, hoping for the best but bracing for the worst. The taxi ride felt like the longest journey of my life, each mile stretching on as I grappled with a growing sense of dread. When the familiar outline of our home came into view, my heart sank. Michael's car was parked outside, its usual pristine condition replaced by a layer of dirt and neglect. I paid the driver, my hands shaking as I approached the front door, my daughter cradled protectively against my chest. The door creaked open to reveal a scene of utter chaos. The house was a mess, the air thick with the stench of alcohol and neglect. My heart pounded in my chest as I took in the sight of Michael and Tom, both sprawled out, lost in drunken slumber amidst the ruin they had created. Anger surged within me, a fierce, protective instinct for my daughter and for the life we deserved. I shook Michael awake, my voice sharp with a mixture of pain and fury. "Michael! What is this? Look at this mess. And you, drunk in the middle of the day? Is this how you welcome your daughter into the world?" Michael's eyes flickered open, clouded with confusion and the remnants of his inebriation. "Wendy? What are? Oh, the baby. Look, I'm a man, all right? I don't do cleaning. Come on, clean up the house quickly. And the baby, why a girl, Wendy? We needed a boy." His words were like a slap across my face, the harshness, the utter lack of empathy, cutting deeper than any physical wound. I turned to Tom, his smirk only adding fuel to the fire burning within me. "Tom, this is what you bring into my home? Encouraging Michael, supporting this madness? You're both out of your minds." Tom's laughter, cruel and mocking, filled the room. "Ah, Wendy, relax. Michael's just being a man, taking charge. You should be grateful, not nagging." The words, the attitudes, they were a mirror of the past, a past I had fought so hard to break free from. But in that moment, I realized that the battle was far from over. My daughter in my arms, I turned away from the wreckage of what was once a home, my mind made up. I left the house, the weight of my daughter in my arms a reminder of the strength I needed to muster. As I made my way to the hotel, my resolve hardened. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges, but I knew one thing for sure, we wouldn't face it alone. The hotel room was a cold comfort, a temporary shelter from the storm that had upended my life. Holding my daughter close, I dialed Michael's parents, Linda and Peter. My heart pounded as the phone rang, the weight of what I was about to disclose pressing heavily on me. "Hello, Wendy? Is everything all right?" Linda's voice came through, tinged with concern. "Linda, I don't even know where to start. It's about Michael, and the house, and Tom," I stammered, the words catching in my throat. "What's happened, dear?" "You're scaring me," Linda replied, her voice now laced with alarm. I took a deep breath, the reality of my situation settling in. When I came home from the hospital with the baby, I found the house. It was a disaster, Linda. Empty bottles, food everywhere, and Michael and Tom, they were drunk, in the middle of the day. Michael, he said things, terrible things. He's not the man I married. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Oh, my God. Wendy, I'm so sorry. We'll be right there. Don't worry, we'll sort this out," Linda assured me, her voice now firm with resolve. The hours until Linda and Peter's arrival stretched on, each minute heavy with anticipation and dread. When they finally knocked on my hotel room door, I barely recognized the stern, determined expressions on their faces. "Wendy, darling, where's the baby? Are you both okay?" Linda asked, rushing over to envelope us in a warm, protective embrace. "We're okay, just shaken up," I replied, the comfort of her hug unleashing the emotions I'd been holding back. Peter's usually gentle eyes were now hard with anger. "Where's Michael now? And Tom? I'll have a word with them. This is unacceptable, completely out of line. They're at the house, or at least they were when I left. Peter, I don't know what to do. This isn't the life I want for my daughter, I said, the despair clear in my voice. Linda held my hand tightly. You did the right thing by calling us, Wendy. We're family, and we don't let family suffer alone. We'll deal with Michael and Tom, and we'll clean up the house. You just focus on this little angel, she said, her gaze softening as she looked at my daughter. We returned to the house, the sight of it still a sharp sting to my heart. As Linda and I tended to the baby, Peter confronted Michael and Tom. Michael, Tom, look at this place. Look at what you've done. This is not how you treat your family, your home. Michael, you're a father now. It's time to act like it, Peter's voice boomed, his disappointment and anger filling the room. Michael's eyes were downcast, the bravado gone, replaced by a shameful realization of his actions. Tom, however, remained defiant, a sneer on his lips. A real man doesn't need to apologize or clean up. This is all just women's work, Tom spat out, his words echoing the toxic beliefs of our past. The air crackled with tension, the clash of values palpable. With my daughter in my arms, I stepped forward, my voice steady and clear. Tom, you're no longer welcome in this house. You brought nothing but chaos and disrespect. It's time for you to leave, I said, my decision final. The shock on Tom's face was evident, but the resolve in mine was stronger. He left without even looking me in the eye, like a stranger. Linda and Peter called a cleaning service, and slowly, the house began to transform back into a home. Michael, sobered by the events, began to apologize, his words a mix of regret and desperation. But the damage was done, and my trust was shattered. As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, the events of the past few days felt like a distant nightmare. Sitting at the kitchen table, cradling a cup of coffee more for comfort than for taste, I watched Linda and Peter busy themselves with breakfast. Their presence was a balm, but the wound was deep, and healing felt like a distant dream. Wendy, you need to eat something. You've been through a lot, Linda urged gently, placing a plate of toast and eggs in front of me. I managed a weak smile, my appetite lost in the sea of thoughts. Thanks, Linda. I'm not really hungry. Peter looked over, his eyes kind but firm. Wendy, you've got to keep your strength up, for you and the baby. And remember, you're not alone in this. We're here for you. I nodded, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. It was comforting to have them by my side, but the decision that lay ahead was mine to make. As if reading my thoughts, Michael walked in, his steps hesitant, his eyes avoiding mine. The silence that hung between us was heavy, filled with words we couldn't yet voice. Wendy, I don't even know where to start. I'm sorry, truly. I lost myself, but that's no excuse. I understand if you can't forgive me, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The apology, sincere as it might have been, didn't erase the images that haunted my thoughts, the disarray, the neglect, the harsh words. It was a betrayal, not just of our vows, but of the trust and respect that had once been the foundation of our relationship. Michael, I appreciate your apology. But this isn't just about forgiveness. It's about trust, respect, and safety, for me and our daughter. I need time, space to think, to understand if there's a way forward from here, I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Michael nodded, the pain in his eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right, even if that means stepping back. As he left the room, the finality of the moment settled in. The future was a blank canvas, and the path I chose now would define the life my daughter and I would lead. Linda reached out, her hand warm and reassuring on mine. Wendy, whatever you decide, we're with you. You're stronger than you know, and this is just the beginning of a new chapter, a new dawn for you and your little one. Her words were a gentle reminder of the strength that had carried me through the darkest of times, the strength that would now light the way for the journey ahead. With my daughter cradled in my arms, her innocent eyes gazing up at me, I knew that the road ahead was mine to pave. It would be a journey of healing, of rediscovery, and of new beginnings.